I'm not a teacher or a doctor. I don't have any statistics. I'm just a mammy. Our lives changed 2 years and 6 months ago. I'm not going to cry. We had the most beautiful 14-year-old boy. Never sick. He had his tonsils out when he was 3. That was the only thing that was ever wrong with him. When he was 12 years old, he made the transition from primary to secondary school, which he found a little bit difficult, like most children do. Jake loved routine, and this was out of his comfort zone. So the school intervened, and they thought it would be helpful if he saw a counsellor. So she referred him to a psychologist, and Jake continued to see the psychologist for 2 years, once a month, sometimes once maybe every 3 to 4 months. I thought occupational therapy or cognitive behavioural therapy would help Jake, and I asked the psychologist would that be possible. So in January 2013, she made an appointment for Jake to see her colleague, which I thought was an occupational therapist. We never had any dealings with mental health. I didn't know anybody in the mental health system, never knew anybody on antidepressants, anything. I was in work that morning, so my husband John took Jake to the appointment. It lasted all of 10 minutes, and he came out with a prescription for Prozac. There was no consent form, there was no explanation what Prozac was, and the reason he was given it was to get him through his exams. Jake had an IQ of 153. He had a condition called mild Asperger's. It's not an illness, it's a condition that no tablet will ever fix, and he was quite happily living with it. He was a normal teenager. He was going through adolescence, he was sitting exams. It's just anxiety, that's it. He walked out of an exam halfway through, which was highly unusual. He also had a meltdown, which was highly unusual, that night, which lasted about 3 hours. I thought of putting him in the car and taking him to our local A&E, but I thought they would think I was neurotic because he was sitting his exams. I never thought that medication could make you do that, because a doctor had gave it to us, a psychiatrist. So they wouldn't harm my child. Do no harm. That's the oath they've taken. So Jake wasn't monitored on Prozac. The dosage was doubled without her seeing him again. She gave a rolling prescription to the pharmacist, who our local pharmacist didn't think to include a patient information leaflet with the Prozac. On day 46, Jake shot himself dead with a .22 rifle, while his daddy and I were sitting downstairs. He had no history of suicide ideation, no history of self-harm, no history of depression. As I said, the only diagnosis they managed to make on him was mild Asperger's. This can never be fixed, ever. I was one of the most overprotective mothers in the world, so if it can happen to my child, well, there for the grace of God goes anybody's child. But what we're left with is fighting the Irish system. Because of Irish psychiatry, my Jake is gone. Despite Irish psychiatry, I'm standing here telling his story. But before I finish up, because I don't have an awful long story, because we're still in the middle of Jake's inquest, they have put us through the ringer, bringing all kinds of barristers and statistics in. We are not allowed to speak about Jake in Ireland because of prescribed medication. If my son had been on cocaine, I would have been allowed to speak about him. I would be behind bars. Now, in my eyes, the prescribing psychiatrist should be charged with manslaughter. I never signed a consent form. We were not informed. That is what this is all about, informed consent, how dangerous these medications are, and stop medicating our children. Let's let them be children. They have problems, you know, we have sadness, it's called life, and you pick yourself up and you get on. You don't just give them a pill. But just before I finish up, 3 weeks ago, we found an email belonged to Jake, which was wrote 24 hours before he died. I'll just read the first couple of lines. He had a little girlfriend in America who he loved very much, and he wrote to her. Just starting to feel down again, honestly. The anti-anxiety stuff is actually an antidepressant, which they didn't tell me. Probably doesn't make much of a difference, but I feel like I'm drugged to the point that it suppresses everything bad until it all suddenly spills out. And they were my son's drug little mind's words 24 hours before he died. Thank you very much for allowing me to tell Jake's story. Thank you.